𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗚𝗿𝗲, everybody, brothers and sisters, for coming out tonight. Today, alhamdulillah, we have a very special guest, Brother Naveed. If you guys remember, a couple weeks ago, we did a tafsir night together, and it was a very nice, powerful message about Surah Duha. And today, inshallah, Brother Naveed is going to discuss a very pertinent topic. And one thing I want to emphasize is last time I didn't give a bio about Brother Naveed. I don't think he wants me to give him a bio. But what I will say is he does study at the Sina Center in America. And inshallah, you guys will see how powerful and how beautiful his message is, inshallah. He's a very few years long friend of mine, more than a few years. And I hope you guys enjoy it, inshallah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Well, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 for having me again, Sanjay. It's very good to be back. So today it's going to be a little bit different than last time, right? The tone of today's talk, we're going to do the first 4 ayat of Surah Hadid. So just the first 4 ayat. However, as we go through these ayat, I want you to be very introspective. Think of it as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking to you directly, as if these ayat were revealed specifically for you. Now, I want to give you some background on these ayat. It is in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the 4th year of the Hijrah. The Prophet ﷺ, he migrates to Medina, and his mission of establishing a new community in Medina begins. Now, the natives of Medina at the time, right, there were 2 tribes, the 𝗬s and the 𝗧raj. The 𝗬s and the 𝗧raj were at war with each other for decades and decades, until finally the Prophet ﷺ came, and under his leadership, a new, basically, civilization started. And the most symbolic change was the actual change of the city, the name of the city, from Yathrib to Medina. Now, Medina was a new land and contained many different challenges. There were reports of prominent companions, such as Bilal 𝗵𝗲 complaining about Medina, saying, Medina, the environment is really different than Mecca. A lot of the companions were getting sick. A lot of the companions, because Medina was green, and there were more diseases and different types of diseases altogether. So a lot of the companions, were getting sick. A lot of them felt homesick emotionally, and because these are city people, just thrown into this, agricultural land in Medina. That's like me taking somebody from New York City and throwing them into like Kansas, like the middle of nowhere, right? So they felt emotionally and physically just, homesick and drained. And now, so a whole new dynamic. There's a new Muslim population, right? There's the Ansar. And now there's a new challenge. There are munafiqun, there are hypocrites living within the community. So before in Mecca, it was all hands on deck. Everyone was fighting the persecution of the Quraysh, right? There was this zeal, there was this strong kind of brotherhood, right? When you're under persecution, for some reason human beings, our iman is just higher in those circumstances. When you're together in a struggle, your iman just, for some reason, right, as human beings, gets higher and higher. Since October 7th, all the atrocities in Gaza, globally you see this iman surge. Like globally, there's people who, prior to October 7th, didn't really practice. And now all of a sudden, people are starting to take their religion more seriously, right? Globally, you see this happening to this day. Well, it happened to the Sahaba, even in Medina. So now you have Medina where they're not being persecuted. They are now under the leadership of the Prophet ﷺ. But now there's enemies within, the munafiqun, right? The hypocrites. And nobody knows who they are, right? Except the Prophet ﷺ. Nobody knows who they are. And they're just walking amongst you. And now there's a sense of lack of motivation. There's actually an iman crisis in Medina. I mean, can you imagine this? The Prophet ﷺ is living in the city with you, but there's an iman crisis going on, right? There's a lack of motivation. There is so many challenges. This is just the reality of life and iman, right? Your iman fluctuates in stages. Some days are really good, some days are not so good. Sometimes, some months even, your iman is very high, and sometimes your iman just dips to a very low state. Now, and think about yourself, right? Think about your, spiritual hijrah, as cliche as that sounds, right? Meaning, before, when you first changed and you first became practicing, you first took Islam seriously, right? How energized you were, how, optimistic you were, how much just life there was, within your life. How many internal conflicts were resolved after you really embraced, truly took Islam into heart. Now, after time goes on, the heart becomes rusty. Your iman starts to become dry. All of a sudden, you hear the Quran and it's just it doesn't hit anymore, right? All of a sudden, the salah is hard to focus now. Naturally, your iman goes through these stages. Well, same thing, right? In Medina, the same exact thing happened. So to address this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed Surah Al-Hadith. And again, like I said, we're going to go over just the first 4 ayats. But keep in mind the audience for a second, right? Keep in mind, the audience is the Sahaba, 4th year of Hijrah. They're in Medina. There's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of problems. There's a lack of motivation. There's a bit of an iman crisis going on. And interestingly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way He starts the surah, the first six ayat of the surah, mimic the Meccan verses, which is very interesting. And again, these are all companions. They've heard the Meccan Quran. The Meccan Quran was mostly about who is Allah, the power of Allah, the hereafter, the imaniyat, basically, right? That's the Meccan Quran. These Sahaba, they already heard the Meccan Quran. They contemplated the Meccan Quran. They already spent so many nights crying over these ayats. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala interestingly starts the surah in the same exact format. سَبَّحَ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. Everything in the heavens and the earth makes tasbih, glorifies Allah, for He is the Almighty, the Wise. But again, hold on a second. The Sahaba, like I said, they already know this. This is not new information. There's an iman crisis going on, and Allah reveals verses that basically mimic everything they already know. They basically mimic the Meccan verses. And this is the first lesson. The nature of the Quran is that it is timeless. The Quran never becomes old. The Quran never becomes used. The Quran never becomes irrelevant. The same exact ayat that solved yesterday's problems will solve today's problems. And those same ayats will come in handy for tomorrow's problems. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above space and time. And His speech is also above space and time. But the thing with the Quran is, this is a quote I heard from a sheikh once. The more you give your ego to the Quran, the more you surrender your ego to the Quran, the more the Quran is willing to share its secrets with you. The more the Quran is willing to solve your problems and to teach you and to share with you the message it came down with, right? And a perfect example of this? All you have to do is just look at all the books of tafsir. How is it that for 14 centuries, 1400 years, scholars, hundreds and thousands of scholars, can look at the same exact ayat and somehow come up with different, meaningful, and authentic interpretations? How is that possible? For 1400 years, the same exact book. And it's not like the Christians where they basically changed everything up and made a whole new religion. No. The same exact ayat, scholars are able to take their personal context and come up with deep, meaningful interpretations that are still authentic, that are still true to the nature of the Quran, without altering the Quran, right? And a great example, the Quran is like Zamzam. Zamzam and the Quran both came through Jibreel, and they both don't run out no matter how much you drink from it. Both are simple and accessible. Water is very simple, very accessible, right? The Quran is also very simple, very accessible, right? The Quran literally is nowhere in the world you go except you'll find a mushaf somewhere. In fact, you don't even need a mushaf anymore. You can use your phone. It's so accessible. Water brings life to the dead and barren land. The Quran brings life to dead hearts and barren souls. Water makes a seed spring into a plant and grow into a tree or whatnot that gives back to the earth. The Quran makes good qualities of your heart spring into action and makes you into a better human being that gives back to the earth. Just like how water never gets old, water can always quench your thirst, the Quran can always quench your soul. The Quran always has the ability to quench whatever missing part of your soul is, whatever, whatever void is inside of you, the Quran has the ability to fulfill it. Now, let's go back to the ayah. Keeping in mind, again, there's a new audience, so there's a new tone now, right? We're no longer talking to the Quraysh, we're talking to the Muslims that were with the Prophet ﷺ from the get-go, but now we're kind of having this lack of motivation, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you notice, last time we covered Surah Al-Duha, it was a very compassionate tone. Now the tone is very authoritative. Like the tone is the tone of someone setting you straight. سَبَّحَ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Everything in the heavens and the earth has been declaring Allah's perfection and continues to declare Allah's perfection. The creation in of itself declares Allah's perfection. Now the scholars, the ulama, they break down tasbih into two categories. There is the tasbih of speech, and there's a tasbih of existence. Tasbih, or glorification of speech, is literally saying subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, right, and so on. And every object in the universe makes this type of tasbih. And what's really fascinating, right, is that this shows how independent Allah is from you and I, right? That Allah doesn't need for you or I to hear the tasbih of the universe. Allah doesn't need you to hear the tasbih of the trees and the rocks and the plants. Right? Allah doesn't need your approval or your presence or your participation in the tasbih that the entire universe does of Him, right? Because who are we, right? What authority do we have to say, well, I don't hear anything, right? There's nothing going on. What's incredible is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you think about it, has allowed us to understand the communication of animals to some extent. And if you have a pet, you know this very well. Let's say you have a pet cat, right? You know when your cat is hungry. You know when your cat is agitated. You know when your cat just wants to play with you. You know when your cat is sleepy. But every single time your cat just says meow. But you know from the tone and the body language and everything, you know what your cat wants. But you will never know when your cat is making tasbih of Allah. That's kept secret from you. That's kept hidden from you. Right? You won't know that part. When do human beings stop making tasbih of Allah? When do people stop remembering Allah? The moment something else takes a greater priority in your life. The moment something takes a greater importance in your mind, that's when people usually stop thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's when you tend to forget Allah. That's when your iman starts to kind of go a little bit downhill, right? When you get distracted and you allow your iman to start dying out. When your priorities change. When in your heart and your mind, Allah is no longer number one. When there's something distracting you. When there's something taking up your mind space. When there's something distracting you from even thinking about Allah, talking to Allah. But by Allah mentioning the entire universe is glorifying Him, وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُمْ. You don't understand them. You don't understand them making tasbih. This is a lesson of humility. You're not that important. Like us human beings, we're really not as important as we think we are, right? In fact, we're so unimportant in the grand scale of the universe that the entire universe doesn't need us to hear it doing its tasbih to Allah. The tree outside doesn't want you to hear the tasbih. That's how unimportant you are in the grand scale of things, right? Usually when people go into an iman crisis, usually it's because they gave their ego a platform. They gave their intellect some type of importance, right? Usually, your mind, there's something in the religion or something about Allah or something you read, something that's bothering you. And usually that's when people start going down the slippery slope and their iman suffers and they start to develop doubts. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And so some people even end up leaving Islam. I personally met somebody who did end up leaving Islam because he basically couldn't understand why there's so much differences in fiqh. It's honestly such a simple answer to this question, but he went down a whole rabbit hole And by the way, this person was born and raised in a Muslim country, by the way. It's not like a Western Muslim, right? But he just couldn't for the life of him understand why fiqh is so vast and so comprehensive. He couldn't understand that. And he left Islam altogether, right? Usually, Iman crisis happens why? You let your ego overtake you. You let your intellect, or you give your intellect a level of importance that it actually dictates and controls you. And you lose that humility before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yet, you and I can't even understand the tasbih of the tree outside. Like, that's how unimportant we are. That's how unimportant, our minds, our intellects are. So once you humble yourself down again and give importance to where it's really due, you give importance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then naturally you're going to start to see, you're naturally going to make tasbih. You're naturally going to be thinking about Allah. Your tongue is going to be busy remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Naturally you're going to start seeing your iman rise again. Naturally you're going to start building up again. The moment you humble yourself back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the moment you start giving importance back to Allah azza wa jal, the whole world can go on glorifying Allah, making tasbih of Allah without you. And if you and I choose to turn our backs and not glorify Allah, well, it doesn't matter. The entire universe will go on. The entire universe doesn't care. It will continue making tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then there is the tasbih of existence. And this was really interesting. The mere fact that you exist is in of itself a glorification of Allah. The mere fact that the sky, the universe, the Milky Way, everything exists is in of itself a glorification of Allah. Now Allah is above all examples, but just to bring this home to you, I want you to think of like a famous painting, a really famous painting, the Mona Lisa or whatever, right? People, it's a masterpiece, and it's showcased in a museum. And people from all over the world literally travel to go see this painting and take a picture of it and take a selfie next to it, right? Just from the painting what a genius the artist was. Just from the painting the perfection of this artist. Now, the entire universe is incredibly beautiful. And people, the mere beauty of the universe showcases the genius and perfection of its creator. And don't people travel all over the world to take pictures? Don't people travel to the natural wonders of the world? I personally live 30 minutes away from Niagara Falls. And all the time I see people from all over the world there. Literally, who traveled from Asia, from Europe, from South America, from other parts of North America, just to come see it. People travel, people make traveling vlogs, people make entire careers out of photography of nature. The entire tourism industry is in of itself a tasbih of Allah. It's in of itself a sign of Allah's perfection and beauty. And look at the slavehood of human beings, right? Even if somebody refuses to make the tasbih of Allah, that person's mere body and how complex it is and how sophisticated it is in of itself a tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So no matter what you do, you're enslaved to making the tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But now, regarding your verbal tasbih, Allah is saying, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗚𝗶𝗴 𝗶. Everything makes tasbih of me. What's wrong with you? What happened to you? What happened to your tasbih? What happened to your glorification of Allah? Did you find someone or something else to be more important? وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ. And He is the ultimate. I'm the ultimate authority. How come my authority isn't enough for you? How come you don't respect my authority anymore? Al-Hakim, I'm full of wisdom. Why don't you trust the things I'm telling you to do are good for you? Why don't you have confidence in my wisdom? Who talks to you like this? When you're having a rough patch in your life, when you're having problems and issues in your life, who talks to you like this? Someone who cares deeply about you. A true friend. Not somebody who's going to fill you up with hot air. No, somebody who's going to tell you like it is. And be a mirror to you. And tell you where you're wrong. And tell you your faults. That's the tone that Allah is talking to you right now. That's the tone that this surah, these first ayat are coming in. Right? You stop glorifying me. You found something else that's important to you. You found something else that's taking up your mind. Okay. لَهُ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. I alone control the heavens and the earth. I alone, the dominion is in my hands. The most important entity in existence is me. I am the necessary being for all of this to even exist to begin with. Whatever is not important to you, whatever you gave importance to in your life, in your mind, that made you forget me, guess what? I control it. Guess what? I control you. Guess what? I control everything around you. 𝗶𝗵𝗲 𝗚𝗿. I give life and I give death. Life isn't for you to give. Death isn't for you to give. I give life and I give death to whoever I want, wherever I want, whenever I want, and however I want. I control when nations fall and rise. I control when projects succeed or fail. I control when you're prosperous or you're poor. I control it all. Is it the death of a loved one that made you stop making tasbih? Is it something in your life that you wanted that made you stop making tasbih? Is it something that you're aspiring towards that made you distracted from my remembrance? Both, all of these things are in my hands and they happen on my watch. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗚𝗿 and I can do anything I want. I'm fully capable of anything. If you gave importance to something, to anything else, don't forget, only I have the power to make it happen. A leaf cannot fall without my permission. An atom cannot move without my permission, without permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لَهُ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ يُحْيِي وَيُمِيتُ وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. So now, do you want to kind of reconsider what's important to you? Do you want to reconsider who's really important, who's really in charge? Well, هُوَ الْأَوَّلُ وَالْآخِرُ وَالظَّاهِرُ وَالْبَاطِنُ وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. Now Allah starts to talk about His qualities. He is the first and the last. Al-awwal wal-akhir. Now what's interesting is, you know how usually Allah, when He talks about His qualities, He doesn't put the wow between the two qualities, like Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, right? Here Allah put the wow between Al-awwal and Al-akhir to tell us that He is Al-awwal and Al-akhir simultaneously. What this means is, every other person or every other thing in the universe that you gave importance to, guess what? I was there before it. I existed before it. Allah was there first. Allah existed before anything, anyone, all of creation ever existed at the same exact time, because Allah is above time. Allah exists after all of creation. So if you can try to imagine this, imagine all of time and space in front of you, right? Imagine it's in my hands. All of time and space, I can just crush it and it's gone. And that's exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Guess who is there? Guess who's going to continue to be there? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, in a way that befits Allah's majesty. Every single person, every single thing, anything that occupied your mind, that led you to this iman low of yours, that led you to this lack of motivation, guess what? It's going to be destroyed. Guess what? It's going to die. Guess what? It's not even going to exist in just a few years. But you know who is going to exist? Allah. You know who is going to exist? I am. Obviously, in the first person to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? It's as if Allah is saying the entire creation, al-awwal al-akhir, the entire creation doesn't really even exist. And that's why one of the names of Allah is al-haq, the true one, the actual entity that actually exists outside the vacuum of space and time. Now, He also says, وَالظَّاهِرُ. There's no reality more obvious, more in your face, more blatantly obvious than my existence. If you simply look at the creation, you simply look at the universe with a heart that's not arrogant, a mind that's not blinded and distracted, there's no conclusion you can come to except that I exist, except that I'm there, except that I made this. You know, personal story, I had a friend who was Muslim but not exactly Muslim, okay? And he was a co-worker of mine. And he lived in Sina Island and we worked in the city. So he would take the ferry every morning to get to work. And again, he was Muslim but not really Muslim, more like agnostic. And one day, out of nowhere, he just tells me, you know what, I took the ferry today, I'm just looking at the sky, like, there has to be a God. Like this can't just come out of nowhere. This doesn't just happen. It can't. It doesn't make any sense. And again, this guy is not even he's Muslim by name, essentially, right? I don't mean that in a derogatory, judgmental way. It is what it is, okay? And even him, he's like, you know what? Yeah, actually, there has to be a God. It has to be. وَالْبَاطِنِ. At the same exact time, He is the universe's best kept secret. No one in this life can see Him. At the same exact time, His existence is so obvious, but at the same time, you can't see Him. At the same time, He's hidden. At the same time, no one can claim to have seen me. وَالظَّاهِرُ وَالْبَاطِنِ. Imam Shawkani, rahimahullah, he said, what's meant by al-batin is that Allah knows everything that you hide from people. One of Allah's name is al-Latif. Al-Latif means the one who knows the most subtle aspects of your life and your existence. Everything that you hide from other people, your private thoughts, your private conversations, what you think of others, right? Your intentions, your emotions, who you truly are inside. Every single secret deed that you hide from people, whether it's a good deed, whether it's a secret sin, all of this, Allah says, I know it. Every single aspect of you, I know it. Allah knows about وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٍ. And He is all-knowing. Every single drop of information that exists, I already know it. There's nothing that can escape my knowledge. Now, connect this part of the ayah with the beginning part of the ayah. Al-awwal wal-akhir. Allah knows everything from its start to its finish. Every single deed that you ever did in your entire life, even those deeds that you thought about but never did, Allah is saying, I knew everything about it, all the inner realities, the outer realities, I knew everything about it from the start to the finish. From the moment you thought about doing something, to the moment you did something, to the moment you finished doing it, to the moment that you start to show off, to the moment you start to brag about it, to the moment you forgot about every single thing I've captured and I know about it. وَالظَّاهِرُ وَالْبَاطِنِ. The outside realities of your deeds, I know everything about it. The outside reality of your personality, I know everything about it. وَالْبَاطِنِ. And I know the inner realities. And I know the inner realities of all your actions, all of your deeds, and who you are as a person, who you truly are. Even the parts of yourself where, as human beings, we're actually capable of lying to ourselves. Me as a human being, I can actually lie to myself and make myself believe a lie. Allah, you can't fool Him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows your reality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows really who you are from the inside. All the spider webs of your heart, all the inner negative maybe emotions that we hold in our hearts for other people, every single thing, even the doubts, Allah knows it all. And Allah knows, and now let's zoom out. Allah knows, and awwal wal akhir, Allah knew exactly the date and the time you were going to come into this world, and where you were going to come into this world, and what family you were going to be born into, and what circumstances you were going to be born into, and what type of life you were going to live. And Allah knows exactly when you're going to die, when you're going to die, where you're going to die, what circumstance you're going to die, what type of angels will be sent to you when you die, what type of circumstance you're going to die in, whether you say the shahada or not, every single thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Now, ask yourself again, do you want to reconsider what's important to you? Do you want to reconsider who really is important? Who really deserves your mind space? Who really deserves for you to be mindful of, and to converse with, and to think about, and to remember, and to glorify? هو الذي خلق السماوات والأرض في ستة أيام. He created, now Allah goes on and He says, I created the heavens and the earth, the entire universe, in 6 periods of time. Commonly, this is translated as 6 days. That's a really bad translation. ستة أيام, 6 time periods. What those time periods are, Allah did not define in the Quran, because again, less than humility, Allah doesn't need to. Allah doesn't need your permission. Allah doesn't need to explain Himself to you. Just, I created the entire universe in 6 periods of time. 6 periods of time, that's it. I don't need to explain any more to you. I don't need to, because that's who I am. This displays Allah's power and displays Allah's total control. Again, an emphasis that everything happens on Allah's watch. Obviously, I'm being metaphorical, right? You guys understand that. Everything happens on Allah's timing. If Allah wanted, could He have created the heavens and the earth in like milliseconds? Could Allah have created all of creation in, I don't know, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days? He could have. But because He wanted to, in 6 periods of time, no one can stop Him. He did so. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He dictates the time of everything in your life. Allah chooses when to fix your problems. Allah chooses when to heal your pains. Allah chooses when to give you success and when to make you fail. Allah chooses, you're fully enslaved to and subject to Allah's timeline. When will Gaza be freed? When will Masjid al-Aqsa be freed? How come we've been making dua for over 70 years and taking action and nothing has happened? Simple. You're the slave and He's the master. The slave can't make demands. The slave can only make a request. Dua isn't a demand. Dua is a simple request, and it's up to Allah whether He wants to fulfill it right then and there or whether He wants to delay it. Right? Same for anything in your life. If you're getting frustrated about something in your life right now, if you're frustrated that a dua isn't accepted or you're not getting anywhere, you're not seeing results somewhere in your life, and you're making dua, this tarawih, last tarawih, the tarawih before, you're waking up at suhoor time, making dua at the last third of the night, and you're seeing no results, and you're getting frustrated. You forgot your relationship with Allah. It's a relationship of slave and master, not the other way around. You don't demand Allah to do anything. You make requests, and it's up to Allah whether He fulfills it or not. ثُمَّ اسْتَوَىٰ عَلَى الْعَرْشِ Then He rose upon the arsh, commonly translated as the throne. So, the throne of a king. That makes Him the king, and it makes you and I the subjects. And the arsh is where? Above the 7 heavens. Right, above all of creation. Now, little tangent here. When Muslim empire expanded, they got in touch with Greek philosophy, and from there, Muslims started to get really complicated about the subject. Like, oh, what does this mean? Is Allah like in a direction? Listen, that honestly, you lost the whole purpose of the ayah. What Allah is trying to make you understand is He is the king, and you are the subject. How that works, how the arsh works, where is it, that's not Allah. You're not important enough to know that, because Allah didn't tell you that. I'm reminding you that you're the slave and I'm the master. That's the purpose of these verses, right? Again, the arsh, from what we know, is where? Above the 7 heavens. Yet, the very next part of ayah, Allah says, يَعْلَمُ مَا يَلِجُ فِي الْأَرْضِ I know everything that goes into the earth. Meaning all the way from the arsh, all the way from above the 7 heavens, right? All the way from above all of creation, in a way that befits His majesty. He knows everything that you do on this earth. وَمَا يَخْرُجُ مِنْهَا And He knows everything that comes out of the earth. Plants, food, you on Judgment Day, when you come out of your grave. وَمَا يَنْزِلُ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ And He knows everything that descends from the sky. Rain, the Quran, blessings from Him. وَمَا يَعْرُجُ فِيهَا And He knows everything that ascends to the sky. Your book of deeds every Thursday when it's presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your soul at the time of your death that's taken up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ And He is with you. أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ Wherever you find yourself, wherever you may be, you're not alone. He's there. He's watching you. He's observing you. He's protecting you. He's testing you. He's sending things your way. You are never alone, no matter what you're doing, where you are. And subhanAllah, if you internalize this part of the ayah, I promise you, your entire life changes. I promise you. Your entire personality flips and changes. The way you behave, even when you're by yourself, all alone in your room or anywhere in the world, will change. The way you live your life changes. وَاللَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ Allah sees everything that you do. So, the ayah starts with, Allah is this incredible king that's so powerful because He just wanted to. He created the entire universe. He created 7 heavens. And because He wanted to, He created it in 6 time periods. And the entire universe is enslaved to Him. The entire universe makes tasbih of Him. But you can't hear it because He didn't want you to hear it. And the entire universe is praising and worshiping Him. And this mighty, majestic king called Allah. Then all of a sudden Allah says, guess what? I'm right next to you. I'm right there. I'm right next to you. I'm right with you. Wait, he's here? He's with me? Doesn't that kind of shake you a little? Like, whoa, hold on a second, wait. We're talking about this majestic, powerful king that created the whole universe, and now he's saying, wait, he's right here? In fact, he says in another part of the Quran, I am closer to you than your jugular vein. I am closer to you than the skin on your body. That's how close Allah says He is. You know what's interesting about people? So kids behave very differently when the authoritative parent walks into the room, right? Employees at work, at a company, behave very differently when the manager walks in, when the boss walks in. People drive very differently when there's a cop on the road, right? People drive very differently when there's speeding cameras checking your speed. When there's a respected authority in your presence, you behave very, very differently. Now, what's interesting about this ayah, the way Allah said, I'm with you. 𝗬𝗵𝗲. This means I'm not just with you. I'm not a spectator with you. I am close to you. During the hijrah, when the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq were basically surrounded, right? And the Prophet ﷺ said, لَا تَحْزَنْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَنَا. This basically means that Allah is close to you. Allah is actively participating in your life. Allah is actively doing things for you in your life. Allah is actively making things happen, making things possible, actively protecting you, actively looking out for you, actively also testing you, actively, taking care of you, actively surveying you, actively, and the list goes on and on and on. He's not just a spectator, but He's actually with you your entire life until you literally take your first step into Jannah. When does Iman start to weaken? When you ignore this fact. When this closeness, the closeness of Allah, that Allah is with you, the fact that He's always there with you, when this concept starts to fade away in your mind and in your heart, that's when your Iman starts to dip. That's when things start to go south. If it bothers you to be alone, if you sit alone in a room for like an hour, turn off your phone, turn off everything, all distractions, and you can't sit alone, you get agitated, that's a problem. You can't sit alone and you can't feel the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's a problem. And I'm not trying to point fingers at anyone, I'm probably guilty of this myself. I check my phone at least 1,000 times a day. As soon as I wake up, I usually check my phone. That is a problem. That is a serious problem. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗚𝗿, he said that who in our times can actually say with confidence, I have khushu in my salah. Even if you know Arabic, even if you know advanced tafsirs, it's hard to focus. It's hard to just relax and feel Allah's presence. Imam al-Harawi, he says in Manazil Sa'iri, he calls this dhuk, or taste. To taste the presence of Allah, to look at Allah with the eyes of the heart. And this is getting really metaphorical, I know, but to feel that, Allah is right there. Allah is with me. How many of us can truly say we feel this every night? How many of us can truly say when we stand in salah, everything around us, even including the person next to us, blacks out. And it feels like we're right in front of Allah. This, subhanAllah, brothers and sisters, is such a lost art. No wonder we have Iman crisis these days. No wonder our salah is so dry. No wonder things are always so shaky and always so bumpy with us, right, when it comes to our Iman. There's a direct link, and I'll end with this, between an Iman low and you forgetting Allah's close company. Going back to the target audience of these ayats, right? You had the companions, now they're in Medina, now they escape persecution, now there's munafiqun, now there's this and that, there's all these challenges, right? It's easy to get lost in the noise. It's easy to get lost even in da'wah work, even in Islamic work. It's so easy to just get lost in the noise, get lost in the hustle and bustle, and forget Allah. Just forget that presence with Allah, right? There's so many things on our minds in our day-to-day lives. How many people even have the mind space to actually sit down for 5-10 minutes and think about Allah? There's a sheikh in the UK. one of my teachers, he said he literally saw him do this. So this is not like those fancy made-up stories to make people look good. No, this is something he actually saw with his own eyes. He says every single day, this man just sits on like a pillar, like leans back on a pillar of the masjid, and just makes dhikr for an hour. And literally, like he's like a rock. Like you could blow a trumpet and he won't be startled. That's an art, brothers and sisters. And if you really want our iman to get back to where it should be, if you want the Ramadan high to not just crash on the day of Eid, this is the key. This is the key that Allah gave to the people of Medina. So why wouldn't this work with you and I? Inshallah, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us people that never forget His company, and to make us people that always feel His presence. With last maybe 5-10 minutes, I'll open up the floor to you guys. And I'll let you kind of tell me, what do you think is the biggest kind of distraction? What is it that people give so much importance to that they forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Oh, open up the floor. Don't be shy.
Personally, I think like work, career, making money. We live in a very like profit-driven society where like as like a healthcare professional personally, I often feel like I'm pushed to forget about everything else that I prioritize in life as a human being and just like focus on that career. Yeah.
No, definitely. Our careers and money is definitely a huge factor. You know, one thing that, again, this may sound like very cliche advice, because when I heard it, I was like, come on. But it's actually true. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 he said this once, that, you know, the cliche statement of don't work hard, work smart, right? Try to find ways in your life where you can get to your financial goals without enslaving yourself, right? What that is, I can't give you the answer to that, but really try, especially those of you that are still in college. I'm not really sure if there's any college people here, or those of you who just started your career, right? Try to find like companies that prioritize work-life balance. Try to find managers that have families and don't expect you to slave yourself to the company. Try to, if you have to, move out of New York City. Venture on. That's what I did. And trust me, life is so much more simple and so much more relaxed, right? That's just a little word of advice I can give. But subhanAllah, it is very true. Career and money really take up a good portion of our time and our mind space. And it truly can become a serious distraction to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyone else?
I think sometimes even when we try to get close to Allah, we get lost in the weeds of being too formal and trying to prove a certain fact, or proving that Allah is this form of way or exists in this form. And I also have like a question in this sort of aspect. Like earlier you mentioned, all of the nature is like mixed tasbih, and there's perfectionism in nature and stuff like that. And the surah that you just described, like Surah Hadid, is, like, if I'm not mistaken, like Surah 57, if I'm not mistaken. And some people like make claims of, oh, this is like the exact middle of 114 surahs that we have in total. And they make a connection of, look at this middle 57, Surah Hadid means like the iron, right? And they make the connection of what's the middle of the earth, like the core is made up of iron. So they use this as a form of like saying, this is one of like the miracles of Allah. And it could be, but sometimes getting too detailed in those kind of finding connections and stuff like that.
For sure. As for that specific interpretation, Allahu A'lam, it could be. I mean, to be very honest, I don't know. There's a lot of these like scientific miracles of the Quran. Personally, I hate them. I don't think they're true. I feel like it's an inferiority complex Muslims have. That we gotta like find some scientific miracle of the Quran, and then later on that same miracle gets disproven, and you're like, yeah, about that. I personally don't really buy into those things. And I know shuyukh who are way more knowledgeable than me, who believe the same thing. There was a whole trend, was it like the 80s or 90s, where it became a big, very popular thing to, say this. I mean, look, if it helped people become Muslim, alhamdulillah, but honestly, your iman should not waver on this, right? Like tomorrow we could discover that the core of the earth is not iron, it's copper. Then what do you do, right? As for your first point, yes. As somebody who graduated from a Islamic seminary, alhamdulillah, I did have to take a bunch of Aqidah classes. It is such a pet peeve of mine that people have boiled down, and this is recorded, I'm going to be in so much trouble, but it's a pet peeve of mine that people have turned Aqidah into literally battles and fights about what does 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗚𝗿, what does that mean? Right? Where is Allah? Does Allah have a direction? And takfir battles and all this nonsense on social media and YouTube, it's such a pet peeve of mine. Literally, without getting too controversial, getting banned, the Muslims, when the Muslim Empire expanded and they met with Greek philosophy, they had to respond to it. Okay? That's what you do. As a scholar, that's your job, right? Scholars, one of the reasons the Ummah is in such a horrible state is because we've kind of told scholars, pause. Don't look at the world. Just keep regurgitating the same old stuff, right? The job of an alim, of a scholar, is to look at the world, look at the challenges, and to face the challenges head on. And that's exactly what the ulama did. However, later on that just became, polemics and fights and all this nonsense. SubhanAllah, like I mentioned, did Allah mention 𝗶𝗵𝗲 for you to sit down and have a philosophical debate, what does that mean? Or did Allah mention 𝗶𝗵𝗲 to shake you and to remind you that I am with you at all times and make you mindful of Him, right? Very, very good point. And I noticed this in so many students of knowledge, so many religious people, they lost the point. SubhanAllah. Allah. Anyone else?
I think when we forget our akhirah, when we forget that we're going to die one day and we have a Jannah or a Jahannam, may Allah protect us, that we have to work for, that's when we struggle. And subhanAllah, when I went to Saudi, that's when I really it was my first time, so it was subhanAllah, it changed everything. Because you really get to, you got the Rawdas there and everything, and the Kaaba. So it was just dunya really it's a distraction. So if we're not mindful, and it's really hard because we're gonna forget. And Shaitan is gonna come and get us distracted and this and that. But if we don't remind ourselves, then we will have a tough time and we're gonna get lost and everything. That's what I realized this year. May Allah make it easy for the rest of them.
I mean, there's a very, very powerful point. وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا, so many different verses that start the same way, right? The hayat dunya is la'ib, it's just plain amusement. The hayat dunya is just mata', it's little, it's qalil, it's just fake, right? Basically. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sort of captures this in 𝗍𝗿 and ākhir, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the first, the last. He is the one that He's always existed before creation, and He will continue to exist after everything is gone, right? I.e. the akhirah, i.e. judgment day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Imam Shawkani said, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He says He knows what comes out of the earth, i.e. when you come out of the earth on judgment day, right? There's all these kind of metaphors within the surah. When people forget you're living for the hereafter, honestly, your deen becomes kind of purposeless. That's just the way I view it, right? Like for example, I know most Jews don't believe in the hereafter. Most modern day Jews, they don't believe in Yawm al-Qiyamah. They don't believe in the hereafter. Okay, I was about to say something politically incorrect, but might explain some of the horrors we see in Gaza and how they can sleep at night, right? Might explain. But anyways, but sometimes I really think about it, because especially Orthodox Jews, they live a very tough life. If you think halal is hard, kosher is next level. Kosher is really hard to find anything kosher, and it's I had a like a Jewish rabbi as a coworker once. Don't ask me why he worked with me, but he did. He literally, even like cheese, he has to like bless it for it to be kosher. And sometimes I really wonder, why do you live your life with so much difficulty when you don't even believe there's a Jannah for this, right? It's the same thing with Muslims. Like, why would you be Muslim? Why would you go through the sacrifices of living a life pleasing to Allah when there's no paycheck? There's no incentive at the end of the day. I really think there's almost like a crisis of people not thinking about the hereafter. That the hereafter is not really in our discussions anymore, if you really think about it, right? Like the brother mentioned, usually, even in like serious circles of knowledge, it's like the most useless polemics of the nature of Allah. As if like the person who doesn't believe 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗚𝗿 means Allah rose above the throne, doesn't wake up at the last third of the night and makes dua. Right? Like it's as if like we completely lost the plot in terms of why we're doing what we do, what's our goal, what's our end point, and all of this stuff. So much of even Islamic like videos and talks, from what I've noticed like on social media, which I hate with my bottom of my heart, is all just like things that don't really matter. All things that it's like just makes you hate other Muslims, just makes you complicate the deen so much. Not saying fiqh is not important, please don't misquote me here, okay? Not saying that advanced levels of ilm is not, it's important. But the people that do it should do it, and the public should focus on the hereafter. In fact, Hasan al-Basri, one of his qualities was that he would, when he spoke to a public audience, he only spoke about, or mostly spoke about the hereafter. Like that was his like main subject. That's all he was known for. Is that when he gave like a khutbah or a khatar or something, he'd speak about the hereafter. But behind closed doors, he was a great alim, right? With his opinions, with everything that he can study with his circle, right? The hereafter is so important, brothers and sisters. I can't emphasize this enough. If you're not working for Jannah, you're gonna burn out, I promise you. If you're not daydreaming about Jannah every single day, you're gonna burn out. At the end of the day, the masjid gets old. At the end of the day, the community turns sour. At the end of the day, this Islam, the outward actions turn into outward actions. If you're not thinking about that reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're not thinking about the day of judgment, you're not thinking about all of these incentives. Sorry for the ramble right there, but it's the last one, inshallah.
Okay, this isn't a question, or I don't know if the comment's related even, but I've just noticed that like online and just maybe that's also like the people I've been speaking to recently, that du'as are so like dunyai. It's like a societal shift now to have your du'as focus on dunya. Like the Sahaba and like the Prophet ﷺ and like Quranic du'as were focused on the hereafter, and nowadays it's like that's like a lost art, we don't, even in our du'as, even in the things that we're begging Allah for, we're not begging Allah for Jannah, we're not begging Allah for refuge from like the hellfire, we're begging for Allah for like $5 million, so I just like that's also something that stood out to me as you were speaking, that we have to reframe our inner thinking. Like it's not just about like our actions, it's also about what we're fearing internally, what we're desiring internally, and that will reflect in our du'as as well.
For sure. I'm kind of forgetting, was this a saying of a companion or was it a saying of a scholar? But it was, you can tell the spiritual state of a community by the questions they ask their scholars. So back in my MSA days, I was the event coordinator. So I would look at all the questions we got at the end of an event, and sometimes the questions are terrifying. I have to say, sometimes you're just like, is this really what people are thinking about? Like seriously, right? Usually it's just questions about, again, like you said, dunya stuff, right? And it's very true. I mean, you scroll through any like 𝗧𝗵𝗲 website in the world, you look at the questions and they're all just about like, I want this, I want that, my marriage is on the verge of collapse, and this and that, blah, 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 right? And it's like, nobody asks, hey, how do I get to Jannah? Like, nobody asks, what's the quickest way to get to Jannah? But there are shortcuts in the Sunnah, and I would advise you to look them up, right? Nobody asks, what's a really good way to make sure I don't go to hell? Like, nobody asks these questions anymore. It's literally just mechanics and dunya and how can I get more and more and feed more and more of the consumerism and the capitalistic society I live in, right? It's like what we discussed last time. So many people think if you become religious, you're going to become a millionaire. Or your life is just going to be this amazing, rosy, red, awesome life. That is a symptom of this disease of 𝗵𝗲 of the love for this world, right? Versus what we discussed last time from 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗚𝗿𝗲, no, the closer you are to Allah, the more He's going to test you. The closer you are to Allah, the worse, quote unquote, worse your life is going to probably get. Because the more severe the tests are going to come your way, because Allah's trying to elevate you hereafter, because Allah's trying to give you more Jannah, and because of that, your life might be more tested.
I have one more comment, just a small
Sure.
one, sorry. I feel like I want to add on that I wasn't trying to be like condescending towards relying on Allah for every little thing, because that's how you foster a relationship with Allah. Relying on Allah for every little thing, because who else is going to have control over that? Not Allah. But like, we can't only do that.
Yeah.
It has to be that and seeking, Allah's power in, hereafter.
No, for sure, of course. And part of internalizing 𝗶𝗵𝗲 is that every single aspect of your life, even like the most petty aspects of your life, you actually turn to Allah. Like you have a convo with Allah about it, right? Even if you're just having a bad day at work, you just have a convo with Allah. You extend your sujood by like just a few seconds and just vent to Allah. How many people vent to Allah? Like that's the thing, right? How many people do you know actually vent to Allah? When you have a problem, usually you hit up a friend. Or if it gets really bad, a therapist. But how many people have actually like woken up at the last third of the night, outside of Ramadan, and just prayed 2 rak'at and vented? It's just not a thing anymore, right? SubhanAllah. So I know there's more comments, but I think we're short on time. Is it?
You can go 5 minutes if you want.
5 minutes? Okay. I know it's a work day tomorrow, so I don't want to. I saw a hand somewhere. Oh, okay. Okay. No, mashallah, that's how it should be. One thing I will say is, as a millennial, I do notice with Gen Z, usually you guys get a lot of hate from us, right? And I have my criticisms too, but one thing, mashallah, and you notice it in the masajid scene, right? And me coming back to New York City after 3 years, I fully noticed this, right? There's things that I think the previous generation really neglected and ignored because we got swamped into, the early 2000s, the dynamics of how Islam was kind of taught and how Islam was perceived. I noticed the younger generation really picked up a lot of those things we neglected. And I noticed this kind of mini revival of forgotten and lost spiritual practices and sunnahs that I believe our generation just completely forgot about, right? And mashallah, that's something that is absolutely amazing and something that really gives hope. And it's true, as the Prophet ﷺ told us, every 100 years, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send somebody to revive the deen. Now, we're not going to get into who that person is or whatever, but every 100 years you see a revival. And I, for one, definitely see it in the younger generation. It's amazing, it's incredible. I think before, like Sanjay, we used to struggle for numbers at events. And now, like, you just put up like a single flyer on Instagram and like, wow, it's full, right? That's a blessing. And I think it's something that you guys should be very proud about and you guys should not let go of. Anything from this side?
I think going back to your original question on like things that make us forget Allah, I would say, you know, in recent halakas we've learned about diseases of the heart, such as arrogance, such as, you know, just forgetting your responsibilities, whether it's missing a bunch of salah, missing Jummah, continuous times. I feel like that causes impurity in your heart, and that increases shaitan's, you know, ability to whisper and affect you negatively. And you know, just staying on deen to the best of our ability for the sake of Allah, not for the sake of showing off or for the sake of anything other than Allah. I think that is, you know, a big cure to just keeping that tawakkul, keeping that remind, that memory of Allah and us.
No, absolutely, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗚𝗏. That's very, very important. The diseases of the heart, which are so subtle. I mean, you know, scholars of the past spent like their entire lives trying to like diagnose themselves and trying to like overcome like 𝗏𝗂 and 𝗶𝗵𝗲 and you know all these diseases. I mean, you know, something I learned recently that I'll share with you, and this is my answer to that initial question, right? I think one thing that adds on to your point, that really gives us these diseases of the heart, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗚𝗿𝗲 talked about this recently, is, and this is going to sound kind of, but it's the reality, people. I really think that our conversations, just our normal conversations, right, with people, with like friends, with family, right, first of all, I'm completely guilty of this. This entire Ramadan has literally been like masjid hopping. I'm just like masjid hopping, meeting all my friends, meeting family, meeting everyone that I knew because I left New York, right? So I'm completely guilty of this. But 𝗧𝗵𝗲, you mentioned something very beautiful. You said that all these conversations, most likely we're going to regret them on Yawm al-Qiyamah. All these conversations, Ibn Hazm, rahimahullah, he mentions, you don't have a single conversation with your friend or your family, except that usually something slips out, whether it's backbiting, whether it might be a white lie, whether it might be something that Allah doesn't like, or even 𝗓𝗏𝗶𝗲, like just useless talk. Like you're just running your mouth for the sake of exercising your tongue, right? There's nothing beneficial. You know, the Prophet ﷺ said to speak what's beneficial or stay silent if you believe in Yawm al-Qiyamah, right? And that, honestly, I really feel like it's lost. Because if you don't do it, you're labeled as socially awkward. If you don't do it, you're labeled as an introvert. But no, I'm just trying to like keep my book of deeds a little minimum here. That's what I'm trying to do. And Ibn Hazm, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 basically quoted him. He says that you'll find, you know, it's a very lonely journey if you're trying to actually be close to Allah, especially in our times. Because even in our times, even in the religious circles, you're expected to be this, because of our American culture, to be this, you know, life of the party extrovert. And by the way, this is even when you're in like this position, when you're like in a religious authoritative position, you're expected to be like this social butterfly, right? And usually, I did this in my own shiyukh and I'm guilty of it. Usually we expect shiyukh to kind of like go out for dinner afterwards, or do this afterwards, or do this afterwards, right? But it's like, in all of that time, how much did you just like talk 𝗓𝗏𝗶𝗲, like just useless talk? In all that time, how much did you, by accident, backbite somebody? You know, on our way here, I accidentally backbited somebody. I caught myself, I was like, ugh, why did I do that? Like literally, we dropped off my brother-in-law, he leaves our break in the masjid, and I accidentally kind of made fun of the other guy that leaves with him, because he always like makes a mistake, and you know, we just kind of mess around with him. But I think those conversations we have in our modern day American Muslim context, I think plays a big role in why we forget Allah and why Iman suffers so much. How many people do you find sitting, waiting, and just making dhikr? Nobody, right? We're just on our phones or just making small talk. Right? That small talk equals 𝗓𝗏𝗶𝗲, right? Literally, just useless talk for the sake of not being awkward. But you look at other cultures, like you look at Oriental cultures, for example, they don't have this concept, right? They can literally like sit in the same room and just stay quiet, right? There's no pressure to like just make small talk and chit chat. And I think that really is taking away from our spirituality. I really truly believe this. Because the Salaf, they would watch every single word they would count the words. Literally like Jum'ah to Jum'ah, they were like, I spoke this many words this week. Not because they're being like jerks, not because they're being socially awkward, because as 𝗵𝗲 𝗚𝗏 said, they're taking themselves to account. Every word, like Allah's going to ask me, so let me make my Yawm al-Qiyamah easier and not talk so much. Right? Let me instead fill the time with dhikr. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗚𝗿𝗲, he said that those like 5 minutes you're texting somebody over something like absolutely useless, those 5 minutes you could have been reading Quran. Those 5 minutes you could have been learning something. Those 5 minutes you could have been, making dhikr. Those 5 minutes, so on, and the list goes on and on, right? I think these micro habits that we developed, right, are what is really killing our iman by giving us these diseases of the heart, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make things easy. I gave you all the problems, but I don't have the solution. I'm struggling with every single person here. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those who feel His closeness and in this life before the next. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those that feel the Jannah of this life and being close to Him before the Jannah of the next life, where we really are physically close to Him. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for all of our sins and our shortcomings and our deeds and our misdeeds. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our efforts, accept our intentions, and to give us sincerity in our deeds, and to forgive us for any atom of riyah and any atom of just showing off, or any atom of our intention that was for other than Him. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive that, to overlook that, and make us sincere, true, humble slaves to Him. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khair, Naveed. As always, barakallahu feek. I think I said this last one ago, I've only seen Naveed twice maybe in the